There is a river in the heart of Nigeria that does not speak in words, but those who listen, truly listen, hear it clearly. It sings in silence, glistens in gold, and whispers truths that are older than stone. The elders say that once you touch its waters with pride in your chest, you will emerge with lessons in your bones. This is the story of a man who tried to own such a river. His name was Adewale Okonjo, and at 43 he was one of the wealthiest men in West Africa. Known across Lagos as the Concrete King, he had built empires of glass and steel where trees once stood. Skyscrapers rose with his name on their deeds. Resorts bore his brand like a crown. Men feared him, women desired him. Politicians listened when he spoke. But for all his wealth, Adewale was not at peace. He often woke at night in a bed too soft, with silence too loud. He had long since stopped dreaming, or at least remembering. And when his heart whispered for meaning, he silenced it with deals, with flights, with noise. Then one day, an opportunity came. A piece of untouched land deep in the Oshun state, along a river untouched by developers. Locals called it the River of Gold. Adewale saw potential. A luxury wellness resort, exclusive and spiritual. It would be his masterpiece, but when he presented the idea to the village elders, the room fell into a silence heavier than iron. One woman, wrapped in yellow cloth and carrying a brass fan, stood and said only this: "That river belongs to no man. It belongs to Oshun." Adewale smiled politely, but inside he laughed. He had heard of the old gods. Stories for children, spirits for those too poor to build walls and too afraid to chase dreams. He thanked them, handed over an envelope thick with money, and ordered his engineers to begin work. But no one told him what happens when you disrespect the goddess of sweet waters. And no one told him what happens when she decides to visit you in your sleep. Adewale's rise was not accidental. He was born in a modest village near Ibadan, the youngest of 5 children, to a mother who sold palm oil at the roadside and a father who vanished before his first birthday. He learned early that the world did not hand out kindness. If he wanted anything, he would have to carve it from stone with bare hands. And so he did. At 10, he sold oranges at the bus park. At 16, he was already handling small contracts for a local construction crew. By 25, he had 2 degrees, one in civil engineering, another in business. By 30, he owned his first tower, and by 40, he had built a reputation feared even by governors. But the more his name echoed across cities, the quieter the voices of his ancestors became. The songs his mother once sang as she braided his hair faded into background noise. The sacred rhythms of bata drums, the scent of incense at shrine festivals, these became relics of a past he had outgrown. He replaced them with polished floors, imported whiskey, and boardroom prayers. When asked about his beliefs, he would smile and say, "My God is efficiency." So when he first heard that the river he wanted was considered sacred, he felt only amusement. "Sacred," he scoffed, staring at the satellite images on his tablet. Do rivers care what men build? His project proposal was immaculate. Architects from London, wellness consultants from Dubai, a private helipad, yoga by the river, meditation gardens, luxury cabins shaped like leaves. He even included a cultural heritage center where tourists could take selfies with masks and statues they didn't understand. The investors were thrilled. Only one thing stood in the way: the local people. They refused to sell. The land was registered in the names of families who had lived there for generations: farmers, weavers, fishermen. And among them, the high priestess of Oshun, a woman named Mama Sei, who many said could call the river by name. She came to him personally, old, slow-moving, but with eyes that held storms. She warned him, "This is not business land. This is river land. The river is alive. Oshun walks there still." Adewale shook her hand, thanked her, and had his legal team draft acquisition papers. He offered double, then triple the market value. Some families accepted, others held out. But it didn't matter. There were always ways. With a few signatures, approvals, and discreet negotiations, the permits were secured. Bulldozers were scheduled. Engineers flew in. The land, it seemed, would fall like all the others. But Adewale had forgotten what his mother once told him in the language of their ancestors. Not all lands can be bought. Some are borrowed, and some, if taken by force, take something back. The machines arrived before the sun rose. In the early morning mist, bulldozers, trucks, and survey equipment rolled in like a foreign army. The birds scattered. The river, still and golden in the dawn light, offered no resistance. The workers began marking boundaries, clearing brush, cutting trees. Adewale stood at the edge of the site, arms crossed, his white linen shirt billowing slightly in the breeze. He didn't see spirits in the swaying trees. He saw foundations, concrete, and future revenue. But from the first day, the land resisted. The machines malfunctioned. GPS signals scrambled. A crane tipped for no reason. Workers complained of strange dreams, visions of a woman with golden skin standing in the river, calling them by name. One man ran barefoot into the bush in the middle of the night, whispering that the water had eyes. Adewale dismissed it all as local superstition, stress, heat, fatigue. But the incidents escalated. A surveyor was bitten by a snake, rare for the area and fatal. A storage container with expensive imported materials caught fire without a visible cause. Local children fell ill after playing near the work site. And the river, it began to change. What was once sweet water turned cloudy. Fish died. The air smelled of metal. Mama Say returned, this time not alone. She brought other elders, drummers, women in gold and white wrappers. They danced barefoot at the edge of the site. They poured honey into the river and sang ancient songs that twisted in the wind. One elder held up a mirror, reflecting the sky into the water. Adewale confronted them. "This is private property," he said, arms raised. "You can't just disrupt my work." Mama Say looked at him, calm but firm. "You are disrupting something far older than your title," she said. "This is not about land. This is about balance." He called security. The elders dispersed without a word, leaving behind only their footprints and the scent of fresh water lilies. That night, Adewale sat alone in his compound, surrounded by silence. He stared at the river through the window. For a brief moment, he thought he saw a figure moving along its surface. Slow, deliberate, graceful. He blinked, and it was gone. He poured himself a drink, told himself he was imagining things, that stress was normal for someone of his status, but deep inside something had shifted, like a tremor under a great building. He didn't know it yet, but the river had already accepted his challenge, and Oshun had begun to answer. That night, the air was thick with silence. Adewale tossed in his sleep, the sheets damp against his skin, though the air conditioning hummed steadily above. Outside, the wind stilled. Even the insects fell quiet. The river, flowing just beyond the construction zone, shimmered with an eerie glow under the moonlight, as if something ancient had awakened beneath its surface. And then he dreamed. He stood in darkness, not blackness, but deep indigo, like the sky before dawn. He was barefoot, wearing nothing but a white cloth wrapped around his waist. The ground beneath him was wet, cool, alive. A golden mist began to rise. Then he saw her. A woman walked toward him, not on the ground, but across the river itself. Her steps caused ripples of light to shimmer beneath her feet. Her skin glowed like the morning sun on honey. Her eyes were deep and ancient, full of both sorrow and knowing. She wore gold beads across her chest and wrists, a flowing fabric of yellow and white that danced around her without wind. In one hand, she held a mirror. In the other, a fan of peacock feathers that shimmered like emerald and sapphire. She didn't speak right away. She only looked at him, and in that gaze, Adewale felt his pride crumble like dry earth. "Oshun," he whispered, though he didn't know how he knew her name. She tilted her head. "You remember," she said softly, "because your soul remembers, even when your mind forgets." He tried to speak, to ask questions, to justify, but no words came. Oshun stepped closer. She lifted the mirror to his face. In it, he didn't see his reflection. He saw his mother kneeling beside the same river, singing a lullaby in Yoruba, washing tiny clothes in its water. He saw himself, a child again, barefoot and laughing, chasing fish in the shallows. Then the mirror shifted. Now he saw machines, steel, tearing into the riverbank. The water cried out, not in words but in anguish. The cries turned into fire. Buildings collapsed. A woman wept beside a hospital bed. "You have built towers," Oshun said, "but forgot the ground beneath your feet. You paved over your spirit." Adewale fell to his knees. The water rose around him, but it was warm, not threatening. It caressed his skin, not to drown him, but to cleanse. "I didn't know," he said. "I only wanted to create something lasting." "And what lasts longer than water?" she asked. "What is more eternal than the river that gave you life?" He bowed his head. "What do you want of me?" "I want nothing," she replied, "but the river wants balance, and your ancestors want you back." She extended her hand. As he reached for it, a current of gold surged up from the river, swirling around his body. It filled his chest, not with fear, but with stillness, with clarity. Then everything dissolved. He woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat, the morning light slipping through the curtains like liquid gold. He sat up, heart pounding. And there, resting on his pillow, was a single yellow flower, fresh, glistening with dew, though no window was open. He reached out, touched it. His hand trembled. The dream had not been just a dream, and Oshun had truly come. Adewale did not speak of the dream to anyone, not to his advisors, not to the investors, not to his assistants who called in the morning with updates on schedules and projections. But something had shifted. He moved slower. He stared longer. He listened, though he wasn't sure what he was listening for. Still, he continued. The work pressed on. The deadlines grew closer. The machines returned to the site. But now, Adewale found himself avoiding the river. He stayed in his trailer, ordered things remotely, refused to walk where he once strode like a king. And then, the real unraveling began. First came the collapse. One of the resort's foundational walls caved in during a test run. No lives were lost, but the damage was extensive. Engineers had no explanation. A weakness in the earth, they said, unseen instability. But locals whispered of something deeper, the river reclaiming its space. Then came the sickness. His youngest daughter fell ill. Her fever would spike at night and break in the morning, only to return again. Doctors found nothing, no virus, no infection. Yet she kept murmuring in her sleep, reaching toward a light only she could see, repeating the same word in Yoruba. Omi, Omi, water. Then came the losses. Investors pulled out. Partners accused him of fraud. Legal threats piled on his desk like vultures circling. His name, once praised in business magazines, now appeared in headlines as a cautionary tale. The fall of Nigeria's concrete king. And in the midst of it all, Adewale stood alone. No more private jets, no more interviews, just silence, and the soft, persistent echo of water always just beyond the window. He returned to the village without announcement, no entourage, no bodyguards, only a simple cloth wrapped around his shoulders and the yellow flower from his pillow, pressed carefully inside a notebook. he found Mama Sei waiting. She did not scold. She did not say, "I told you so." She only led him to the riverbank, where the elders had gathered. Incense curled into the air, drums beat slowly, like a heart beginning to remember itself. Women sang in tones that trembled the soul. Adewale knelt. The high priestess approached, holding a calabash of river water mixed with honey, herbs, and palm oil. She poured it over his head, letting it run down his face, his shoulders, his spine. As the water touched him, he wept, not from pain, but from release. The river didn't punish him. It purified him. That night, for the first time in decades, he dreamed again, not of business, not of wealth, but of trees growing, of children laughing, of his mother's voice calling him home. He awoke beside the river, resting against a tree, with the sunrise kissing the water like a promise. And this time, he understood. Years passed. Not many would have recognized him now. The man who once wore tailored suits and designer watches now walked barefoot through markets and festivals, dressed in hand-woven cloth and beads gifted by elders. His beard had grown grey, his voice softer, but his presence more powerful than ever. He no longer built towers, he built sanctuaries. With what remained of his wealth, Adewale created a foundation dedicated to the preservation of sacred rivers and spiritual heritage across Yoruba land. He funded education for priestesses and apprentices. He restored shrines, sponsored traditional music and dance, and paid reparations to families displaced by past projects. Most importantly, he returned to the river, not to build, but to honor. Each year, on the same date as the first bulldozer's arrival, he held a festival in Oshun's name. People came from villages and cities alike, dressed in gold and white, bringing offerings of honey, oranges, mirrors, perfumes. The riverbank would come alive with drumming, singing, and praise, celebrating not only the orisha, but the wisdom of surrender. At the heart of it all, Adewale stood, now called Adewale Oshun. Adewale, son of Oshun. He never again tried to own the river. He sat beside it, listened to its songs, and let its reflection shape his days. During the most recent festival, a young boy approached him, curious, wide-eyed, full of questions. "Is it true," he asked, "that the river spoke to you?" Adewale smiled, knelt to the boy's height and said, "No, she didn't speak. She reminded me how to listen." The boy looked confused. "You will understand when your heart is ready," he said, placing a small mirror in the child's hand. "Everything sacred reflects something inside you." As the sun dipped into the water, turning the river gold once more, people danced and prayed, and the laughter of children mingled with chants to Oshun. And somewhere, perhaps in a place between this world and the next, a woman made of sunlight and silk smiled from the river's edge. The river does not seek revenge, it simply remembers, and when a man forgets who he is, the river waits, silent, patient, eternal, until he is ready to return. Adewale's story is not rare. It is the story of many who trade their essence for ambition, who confuse concrete for power and forget that real power is found not in what we build, but in what we protect. Oshun did not come to destroy him. She came to remind him that wealth without wisdom is a drought of the soul, that water, though soft, carves mountains, that the divine does not need monuments, only memory, respect, and the rhythm of ritual. Adewale was not cursed. He was offered a choice. And in the stillness of surrender, he chose to remember. You too who are listening, perhaps there is a river within you waiting to flow again. Perhaps something in you has grown dry, cracked beneath the heat of striving. Perhaps you have forgotten your song. Let this story be a mirror. Let it show you not just who you are, but who you still can become, because not all stories are warnings. Some are invitations, and the orishas, they are always watching, always listening. always waiting for us to return.